All right, I think people will continue to flow in the next few minutes, as is normal in these types of webinars, but I wanted to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Poulos. I'm the Executive Director at the Center for Justice and Human Dignity. Our work focuses on expanding safe and innovative alternatives to incarceration. We also do work around conditions of confinement and correctional culture, and we also work in the reentry and reintegration space. And today, our primary focus will be conditions of confinement and correctional culture. This is our second Innovations in Corrections webinar, and our last one was exceeded at least my expectations, perhaps everyone's, with hundreds of people from all over the country joining, as far away as Norway and possibly other countries as well. Lots of formerly incarcerated folks joined. It was quite the great event, in my opinion. And today we are joined by two guests, as well as our co-host, Dr. Lisa Clements, and we have someone new on the webinar today, and that is Executive Director Ryan Thornell from the Arizona, let's see if I get this correct, Department of Corrections, Rehabilitation and Reentry. And Director Thornell was appointed as Executive Director by Governor Katie Hobbs in January of 2023. He previously served as the Deputy Commissioner for the Maine Department of Corrections, where he was recognized for developing significant initiatives resulting in improved policies and practices around incarceration and correctional reform. He began his career as a frontline correctional officer in the South Dakota Department of Corrections and has since served in a number of roles and experiences during his career, including roles within correctional facilities and in community corrections. He received his master's degree in criminal justice from the University of Cincinnati and his doctorate in political science from the University of South Dakota. We're also joined again by the Maine Commissioner of Department of Corrections, Randall Liberty. Maine is my home state, so it's always great to be joined by anyone from Maine, but particularly Commissioner Liberty. Commissioner Liberty is responsible for the direction and general administrative supervision, guidance, and planning of both adult and youth correctional facilities and programs within the state of Maine. He has more than 36 years of leadership experience in the field of corrections and law enforcement, having served as the warden of the Maine State Prison since 2015, where he worked to reduce recidivism through enhanced programming, education, and vocational training. Prior to that, Commissioner Liberty served more than 26 years in the Kennebec County Sheriff's Office, including 9 as the elected sheriff, during which time he focused on drug enforcement and substance use disorder education and treatment. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Lisa Clements, who is the Executive Director of the Clements Initiative, Senior Behavioral Health Advisor at the, now let's see if I get this one right, National Association of State Mental Health Program Directors Research Institute, and a Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance Visiting Fellow. So those are our hosts and guests for today. The goal, or one of the goals of these webinars, is to raise awareness about the possibilities that can happen when correctional leaders, staff, community members, incarcerated folks break down the us versus them dynamics and collaborate to improve the systems that we have. Our goal is also that correctional leaders who participate and join and observe these webinars will consider adapting and adopting some of these similar practices and policies in their own systems. And with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Liberty. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome, Dr. Thornell, and thank you for being here. Always a pleasure. Would you take a moment and tell us about your vision that you've established in Arizona, reimagining corrections, and what led you to this, and how it's been implemented and how it's been received by the staff?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you, Chris, and thanks, Commissioner Liberty, Dr. Clements. It's good to be with you all. Good to see you all again, and thanks for everybody for joining. It's humbling to have so many people from across the country and some international that are interested in hearing about what we're doing here in Arizona. We're really proud of what we're doing. And so thank you all for being interested and for joining this morning. Anytime you step into a new system, like stepping into the role here as director in Arizona, to me, it's important that you take significant time and focus to really understand what the present issues are, what the dynamics are, and also take time to understand the past practices and the past challenges that have really led to wherever the agency's at, wherever that system's at. And certainly here, there were a number of issues, number of current issues, but also past issues and challenges that contributed to kind of the state of the system as I came in. And so as I came in, it became very apparent that there was a significant need for some leadership, just some general leadership, some general direction for the agency. Both the staff and all of our stakeholders, internal and external, were really looking for a plan, some sort of idea of what to expect as we go forward as a team. And it was clear to me that very early on that this plan, this leadership, this guidance and direction had been lacking for some time. And at the same time as we were coming in and trying to understand everything, the time I spent internally with the staff, but also the time I spent externally in the community, really convinced me and showed me that a majority of the staff and most of the stakeholders in the community really wanted the agency to evolve, really were interested in modernizing the work that's being done here and trying to do things differently. There was a significant positive response to this idea of trying to do things differently. And so I took all that in my first few months here, and the word that just kept coming to mind as I was having these conversations, as I was brainstorming with our team, was this word reimagine. And it kept being the word that really illustrated what we needed to do here, what needed to happen here in the state of Arizona. And if we think about what that word reimagine really means, it means redefining, right? Reconceptualizing, really trying new things. And so our vision here for ADCRR has become reimagining corrections. Very simple, two-word vision. And in setting that vision, knowing what led up to it and then establishing it, the goal of creating that vision has to give staff and really all of our stakeholders a level of permission, an authority, an ability to explore new practices, the support they need to really be creative and try to do something different. And maybe most importantly, that vision has given them something that they can anchor to, right? It gives them a direction of where we're going to go. Whether they fully agree with it or not, at the very least, it gives them something to ground themselves to. So they know day to day, everything we do, whether in a facility or out in the community, they know that it's going to be about redefining and trying new things and reconceptualizing what we do. And so that's been helpful for staff to have that to really anchor to. And overall, it's been really well received. Anytime you do anything, I think we all know, you have supporters and you have naysayers, right? It's the reality of what we do. And certainly, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I have 100% support across the state of Arizona, internally or externally, because that's not real. But I can confidently tell you that we have many more supporters, again, internally and in our community stakeholders than we'd have naysayers. It's overwhelmingly clear that people really want to do corrections differently. They want better outcomes. They want different outcomes. And they really want to contribute in a different way to public safety. They want their role in public safety to be more than just locking people up and keeping people behind walls and fences. They want it to be something more that contributes to the community. So that's what we've done. That's the vision that we've established here. I think overall it's going very well, and staff are receiving it. as much as I could expect them to 18 months in.
That's great. And I think that's a really great concept of reimagining corrections. Critical for staff to kind of have a clear vision from the leadership. So good work on your part. And as we saw in Maine, the work you did to transform, much of the work we did here, it took time. And our industry can be heavy with culture, and it takes time, and it takes finding champions and proof of concept, and good work, really good work. Would you tell us about the transformation of culture to a more modern communication-based culture and the importance of professional development for staff?
Yeah, communication is key. And, what I've found in, what we've experienced in Maine together, and, we're experiencing here in Arizona, and just, years of being in the industry, what I've learned and witnessed is that communication is probably the most important component of all of the challenges we face. Whether we're talking about communication at the staff level, communication at the population level, communication with the community. When we really stop and break down the good and bad about what happens in a correctional system, the issues we face as an industry, much of that can be traced back to how good or how poor our communication is. And so, one of the underlying principles here of the work that we're doing is focused on communication, right? It's about shifting from kind of this power and control, compliance-driven mentality to one that's really focused on healthy communication. Because if we communicate well, right, whether it's peer-to-peer, staff to population, or public at large, if we communicate well, and we do what we say we're going to do in that communication, right, and we model that every day, we're going to reap the benefits from it, right? Staff are going to be more likely to work with the ideas that we share with them if we talk with them about it, and we help them understand it, and we provide them training and professional development to go and carry those out, right? The population is going to be much more likely to do what we ask them to do and comply if they simply know what we're asking them to do. They hear about it in a respectful way, right? They have an opportunity to maybe ask questions to better understand it, right? Then they're more likely to participate and do what's necessary. And overall, that then is going to bring down, we know it's going to bring down the tension, whether it's inside of our prisons or out in our communities, right? And it's going to improve the outcomes. Now, one of the challenges is that that's a little bit of a different approach to make communication really one of the underlying foundational principles of what you do, right? Rather than kind of that us versus them or power and control, do what I say sort of approach. And so staff really need support. Staff need time to really understand that, an opportunity to practice it. They need to be able to go to training or see others do it and witness it. They need to have their leadership model it, coach and support it. And so that's critical, right? Making those opportunities available to staff is really important. And so as what we've really worked on doing here is those sorts of things, right? Establishing the expectation, but then starting to coach and model and lead that so our staff and all of our stakeholders can see it. And that requires our training division, our professional development division, to really modify the curriculum that we're using when we train our staff, right? It's required us to overhaul our correctional officer training academy to make sure that we place the proper emphasis on communication and those sorts of culture changing topics so that our new recruits hear that. And it requires us to focus on things like our field training officers, right? So that when those new recruits hit the unit, the field training officers reinforce that communication-based culture. And so the work has to be ongoing. It is certainly a culture transformation. And I think the last thing I'll say in terms of helping staff along is it's important for staff to also realize they weren't doing things wrong previously, right? It's not about telling them their past practices were bad. It's about talking about evolving, right? Becoming more modern, and helping them understand the downstream effect of that. Because one of the things that I've found staff in the industry, Arizona and beyond, lose connection with is the role that they play in the broader scheme of public safety, right? The scheme of public safety beyond the prison walls, right? Because we really need to understand and need to value the role that corrections plays in public safety in our communities. And if we emphasize good communication, good rapport, good engagement while we have somebody incarcerated with us, they're going to be more likely to rehabilitate themselves and participate in those opportunities. They're going to be better prepared for release, and then they're going to be better individuals, better contributing individuals when they're back into the communities, when they're living next door to our family, our friends, and our local communities. And so, helping staff understand and make that connection so far downstream, and really have a buy-in to that community public safety aspect is really important. And then tying it back to the emphasis on communication, that's really where the work is, where the work needs to get done, and is helping to help our leaders get that work done at that line level. So that's where we are. We're still knee deep in that transformation process. It is a long road, as you know. The time in Maine, when I was there, took a long time to transform that culture as well. Into communication-based approach. And we're still knee deep in it here, but it's going well. But that's really the focus on it. That's really what I believe we need to do to help support our staff, is find those ways to make those connections and empower them for their role.
So, Commissioner Liberty, would you mind if I jump in on that?
Please do.
Excuse me. So, so good to see you in this conversation, Dr. Thornell. You and I first met in Maine a couple years ago when I was on a site visit, and we started the Clements Initiative in partnership with Correctional Leaders Association, because I really wanted to honor my husband's legacy and support correctional leaders. That's what where my flag is at. And so seeing you here in this leadership role, after seeing you in Maine and the work that you were doing there, is just a particular treat for me. So thank you for joining us today. So I'm interested, given all that you faced when you moved to Arizona. So, you had a personal move, you had a family that you were moving across the country, you probably looked for houses and did all of those things. You managed to settle in another state that was pretty darn challenging, right? You given the scope of your work in Maine and what you had done, just the size of the system that you were managing was quite a significant change. And so I'm thinking about the leaders that are on the phone and trying to create in them an understanding of what that transition was like for you. So given the issues that you've described thus far, and some of which we talked about, before the webinar started, how did you decide where to start at? With Correctional Leaders Association and all the related folks who are on this call today who have a passion around equipping corrections and, really supporting reentry of individuals into a safe society. How did you decide, of all the things that you discovered, where you wanted to start?
Oh, well, thank you. That's a good question. It really has to be an individualized approach. One of the things that was really important to me, and I think really helpful as I came in, is coming in with the blinders off, and also coming in working very hard to leave Maine in Maine. Right. It was important to me to come in and assess what was happening here in Arizona based upon Arizona, and what I know just about good corrections overall, not about, the wins and losses in Maine or any other place I've worked in. it's really about coming here and making your plan, your vision, specific to this state, right? So for me, I obviously did my homework, as I had time moving across the country and making the long drive, and talking with people, understanding the ins and outs of the agency, some of the history of the agency, who's who, what's been taking place in the last 5-10 years, the litigation, boy, the litigation, but then when I hit the ground here, and got settled myself, because I had a period of time here where it was just me here, as the family was still doing their transitioning from Maine. I spent a lot of time just getting out and seeing our prisons, seeing our staff, just hearing from our wardens and some of our senior leadership, and just being able to walk and talk with them and their deputy wardens and others who had been in the system for a long period of time, right? Engaging with staff and community stakeholders at the same time, and really listening to their concerns. And that really helped me, find out what's been tried, what hasn't been tried, what ideas have been put forward and maybe not given any time or credit. But it also allowed me to really figure out what staff needed, what the agency needed to grow, right? It very internal culture here in Arizona, as many other states have also, where what I heard early on was, this is Arizona, right? It's different. It's different than other corrections elsewhere. And we hear that a lot. But the reality is that in many ways, corrections is corrections, right? The challenges here in Arizona, very similar to challenges in other states, right? Yes, the population dynamics may be a little bit different, but corrections at the end of the day is corrections. And so the way that the way I chose where to start was based upon that process. It went a lot quicker than, I think, any leadership book would tell you. They tell you to come in and take your time, get to know things, assess for 6+ months or what have you. I didn't have 6 months, right? The pressure was on to hit the ground running and start moving in a certain direction. And so that's what we did. But one of the top things that I prioritized here, and we continue to prioritize based upon that early assessment, is helping support staff and the professional development staff. And maybe most importantly is getting staff exposed to corrections outside of Arizona. Again, not because everything happening here was wrong, right? But there are other places, other states, other agencies, other professionals, right, who are doing things a bit differently, maybe have tried new things and gone through that growth process themselves, that it was important for me to get my staff to go see and just hear from, right? Participate in trainings in other states and professionally develop relationships with other states to hear those ideas and hear those thoughts. And so that was one of the things we prioritized very early on. We prioritized leadership development, where we've been able to host 5 leadership summits in about a year and a half, where we're able to bring our leaders together and just concentrate on what that growth looks like, corrections related and non-corrections related. But then we also dove into and prioritized, inmate population improvements that needed to be made, right? We recognized that our classification instrument was extremely outdated and needed significant work because it was causing a lot of population downstream effects. And we're still working through that a year and a half later, even though it was a very early priority, right? We had programming placement issues that we're still continuing to work through. And we had a lot of lockdown sort of practices, closed yards that we took steps to open up. And then I think the last thing I would just say in terms of what we identified to prioritize very early on is the community, building back the community trust, or establishing a level of community trust. It was very clear coming in here that there was a challenging relationship between the agency and the public. Public did not trust anything that the department said. The litigation did not help that. And so we've spent a considerable amount of time and effort building back that trust, showing the public what we do, sharing our wins, sharing our losses, being as transparent as we can be with them. And so that's really what we've done here. What I would share, just in general that, I think is really important in these transitions is, coming in, you get a lot of pressure from all these different stakeholders to, go do X, Y, or Z right out of the gates. It's important to know that we shouldn't come in and chase these different flashy ideas, right? The topics of the day, whatever's happening over here that's getting all this publicity and press, like that shouldn't drive what we do. We need to come in and focus in on what's happening in this state, what this agency needs, what this team needs, and really prioritize from there. So that's how the process went on the professional side of things.
I've noticed that you keep a fairly significant presence on social media. And so I've seen a number of your celebrations about, staff achievements and staff awards and, ice cream days and all kinds of things. And so you've decided, as opposed to letting the Arizona system be out in the media negatively on most days, you seem to have made a decision to get the word out in a very positive way. Could you speak to how you're relating to the media these days?
Yeah. And you're exactly right. One of the things early on that I heard as a frustration from leadership here, but also staff here is, there's so much negativity. There's so much criticism of the agency, right? And, we have to be honest, the litigation and problems and issues contributed to that, right? It wasn't made up scrutiny, but it was all negative scrutiny. And so, a lot of our content topics and meetings centered around, can we just start taking steps to change the reputation of the agency? I have wardens who really are working hard because they want to change the reputation of their complex specifically and get rid of the 15 or 20 year ago incident or issue that continues to hold them back from a public perception, right? And so we have a fantastic media team and public relations team here that we've shifted the focus to where it becomes a very proactive approach, right? Where we do share all of the positive stories. We highlight our staff members. We highlight, productivity that's happening in our institutions and out in the community, and the partnerships that we form. But the other thing that we do is we share information that gives data, that gives the facts behind what's happening, and doesn't shy away from areas that we know we still need to do better, right? So it's not just about sharing only the wins and only the positive stories. It's also about letting people behind the curtain, which I know is, scares people in the world of corrections, but letting people behind the curtain to see, what is your public agency really doing, right? What do our numbers say we're doing? What are the issues that we're tackling? It's important that we highlight what our strategic plan is and what progress we're making in that plan, and allow the public to be able to see that, read that, and know that, because then that provides a level of accountability to us. And so that's absolutely what we're trying to do. We're also taking that approach in some of our most challenging situations, like litigation and other public scrutiny, where rather than let court proceedings and filings and things dictate what the story really is, we're putting out the facts on our own. We're putting out reports on our own to really share the good work that our staff are doing, because our staff are bending over backwards to make good progress. They are, one of our foundational principles is important personally to me is perfect effort. And our staff have taken that to heart and are giving everything they can to move this agency forward in all these areas. And so it's my responsibility to do everything I can to share that with the public. And I think in the process that starts changing our reputation, and it starts reestablishing, or at least building, a new level of trust with the public.
Really great work, Ryan. I'm glad to hear of your efforts with communication, recognizing staff, focused on outcomes when residents are released back into the community, wellness for the team that are doing the work every day, all critically important. Great work. We have one of the messages indicated that Kathy says, as a mom of a son incarcerated in Arizona, we are so grateful to have Director Thornell. We're seeing changes already. That's a real testament to the work of the people in the facilities and in the community working every day. What are those changes that you think that family members and residents are seeing, since your arrival?
I think there's a whole host of them, and some of it varies by, where individuals are located. I can share a few easy highlights, around some of our special populations. And what I mean is, our women's population, for example. One of the very early recognitions and plans that we put in place was we recognized that the way that we were incarcerating women in Arizona was almost an exact replica of how we were incarcerating men, which most of us realize isn't how we should incarcerate women, right? They have different risk factors, different needs, different circumstances, different life histories that lead them to incarceration and impact them during incarceration. And so we shouldn't act like a one size fits all for the entire population. So we've brought in new leadership at the women's prison, but we've also established a women's services administrator to guide our policies in a much more gender responsive way, to support our staff, to be much more gender responsive in the work that they do. So I think that's one glaring change that the family of women at our women's prison and the population there sees, and we hear that feedback quite often. We've also done that on the ADA side of things to make accommodations for the population, where we've established an ADA administrator to make sure that we're accommodating those disability needs that individuals have across the state and following through on the ways that we need to. We had situations where that wasn't happening. And so I think those are quick ways that family and population sees. And we're doing those things even broader to the broader population, right? We're recognizing that the practices in our prisons were a little bit outdated, right? There were things that we could do better to make the environment better. Another very early practice change that we made that's contributed and positively impacted the population is we opened up our yards, right? Most of our yards were closed down, very controlled, very few hours out of cell every day. Our maximum custody population was through the roof any given day. And so we've lowered that restrictive housing population by 80% in the last 18 months. And we've opened up our yards to give the population greater access to services on a daily basis, greater ability to move when they're out and about. And that's then increased educational participation, programming participation. And so that's another early, I'll call it an early win, although, there's challenges that come with that. There were certainly dynamics and things that resulted from that. We've also implemented different treatment approaches, right? Many people know that, making sure that we provide medication for the treatment of opioid use disorder is very important to me. It's a significant impact to our population. And so we implemented that in June of 2023 here. And today I can tell you that we have over 7,000 individuals every given day receiving medications for opioid use disorder across our state, right? And so the population feels the impact of that, the positive impact of that, right? And the families experience that as well. So those are a few highlights. I guess the last thing I would highlight on this, and it might seem small, but I think it's been incredibly impactful, is we've taken some steps to change environments, right? Every visitation room that I walked in my early touring, and any wardens that I have on here today will know exactly what I'm getting at. All the walls were white, and they were very stark and bleak, and not what I would say is conducive of a good visitation environment for loved ones, right? Whether it's children or other loved ones that come and visit, mom or dad, what have you, brother or sister. And so wardens and deputy wardens and unit staff have championed painting those areas and creating better family spaces and creating just opportunities for those connections to happen. And, you know, that has resulted in, I think, better visitation experiences with family members than were previously in place. So those are just a few examples of things that we've done.
Fantastic. You know, being the son of a formerly incarcerated individual, I know how important those normalized visitation spaces are for the children, for the spouses and family members. Great work, and really good to hear 7,000 people are now receiving medication for substance use disorder. And the 80% reduction in restrictive housing, fantastic, amazing work, really commendable. Would you, I believe that I heard that you had recently opened up a facility to treat mental illness. Is that something that's ongoing in Arizona? The efforts to address those issues?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, so just recently, actually about a month ago now, we held a ribbon cutting for a new inpatient mental health unit, which almost doubled the amount of beds that we had available for that highest level of mental health treatment for our male population. And that's a licensed unit, licensed by our Department of Health to provide that level of treatment. What we did is we had an empty unit that under past administrations had been emptied and was going to become a very high security area for general population. We realized that it wasn't necessary. And so we took the opportunity to transform that space. Our facilities, our physical plant team did a tremendous amount of work, really great work to bring it back to life. And then we created a partnership with a local, well, I won't say local anymore because they're taking off significantly, but a creative art studio here in the community called Art of Our Soul that combines art therapy and music therapy into a treatment modality. Just a tremendous program, tremendously impactful in the community populations. And we created a partnership where, you know, he had this goal of bringing his program inside a prison. And I said, why not? Let's do it. And we created this space inside the inpatient mental health treatment unit with support from a community health center to fund the program. And now we opened up this art studio. It looks just like the studio in the community that individuals would go to, right inside the walls of this mental health unit for our highest acuity mental health men. And they're able to go there for programming as part of their treatment programming while they're there in that unit. And we're in the process, we're probably 80% done with doing the same thing for women out at our Perryville prison with another community health partner and this same art program. So yes, it's you know, mental health treatment, as we all know, is something that's becoming more and more necessary, more and more important inside prison settings for all the reasons I think everybody here knows. We just have to find new, innovative, and expansive ways to treat that population. And so I think our space, our new space and new programming provides a whole different treatment modality here than they've experienced in the past.
So I'd like to jump in on that one. That is music to my ears, Dr. Thornell. As you know, as a psychologist and having spent my entire career on this intersection between individuals with behavioral health needs and who have justice involvement, congratulations. I'm thrilled to hear the great news. You know, you're talking about some innovations that are challenging for some to hear. And so doing art therapy behind walls and doing mental health treatment, and my goodness, doing, substance use and opioid kinds of programming and planning. And though many of us on this call are in absolute support and applaud the work, there are others who would say, hey, what happened to locking people up? And why are you diverting all your attention, effort, resources to all of these other things? I don't get to go to art therapy and I'm on the street, right? And so could you talk to how you bring along those individuals in your community and nationally that you're interacting with who aren't as bought into those approaches and that kind of support for individuals and preparing them for reentry?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. And I think I really like the question because it not only, certainly we worked through and we're still work through gaining buy-in and cooperation and interest from local staff right here in Arizona, but also to your point, nationally, there's still a significant amount of resistance to doing things differently in the space of corrections. I think for me, it really is, a question of why are we really in this business, right? What is the real purpose that corrections needs to be serving? And it gets back to some of what I spoke a little bit about earlier in terms of what our role really is from a public safety perspective, from a community partner perspective. If we're solely in this business to simply lock people up and keep them behind walls and fences until their release date, and then just release them back into our community, we're in this for the wrong reason, right? We don't value that time we have those individuals, and we don't give any emphasis or importance to what kind of impact we can be making in our local communities, right? And so anybody who struggles to understand the importance of art therapy, medication-assisted treatment, opening up a prison yard from a lockdown status to more of an open movement perspective. Anybody who struggles to understand that, my challenge to them, my conversation with them would be around why is it okay to keep them locked down and then release them back into our community? Why is that okay when we have a period of time here in Arizona? We have people for almost 3.5 years on average before they're released. That's give or take our average, right? Why is it okay that we don't use that 3.5 years to try to do something with them that better prepares them for their release and creates a better neighbor to our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our fathers, our friends, right? We should have a personal and professional responsibility to take that period of time and do everything we can, as difficult as it could be, to make an impact on them. We're never going to make the entire impact, right? We're not going to reach them all, right? But we have to give a perfect effort in trying to reach as many as we can and help them transition into our community so that they don't come back. And in the process, if we address their needs and their risk factors and help them along the way, they can contribute to our workforce challenges that we have, right? Which boosts the economy in our communities, that keeps them more stable once they're out of our prisons, right? And keeps them with their families, right? And contributing. And so to me, it's not about giving one population something and holding something back from staff or others, right? To me, it's about our commitment to our buy-in, our responsibility as public servants to making our community safer, right? And if we do that, if we focus there, naturally our prisons become safer because those individuals are involved in programming, they're having good communication, they've built rapport with our staff, and they're on their way to a successful transition into our community. And so that's the conversation I have with those who struggle to really understand why we're doing what we're doing, why we're trying to make this transformation. I view if somebody's with us for 3.5 years and all we do is keep them under lock and key and control, and we don't allow them to try to do something different and give them opportunities to leave as somebody different, I feel like we're not doing justice to what the community deserves when that individual comes back out to them.
Well said, Ryan. You know, when you provide purpose and programming and you do provide hope for the residents, it's not only a better environment for the residents, but also for the staff. And it's really the best staff program, I think, that we can provide a safe environment for our staff to work. You and I both know that enhanced education opportunities are transformational to many of the residents in our care. What's the current status or your future vision for enhanced education in the facilities?
Yeah, education, I'll tell you, education is probably the single most impactful intervention opportunity that we can give somebody while they're incarcerated. And that, it doesn't always have to be a college degree. It can be any number of educational advances. We have a great education team here. What we really worked through, what we've spent the last 1.5 years working through is solidifying kind of what I would call our education infrastructure. We have education that we can offer through tablets. We also have education that we offer through computers and even paper-based education. And so what we've really done is try to stabilize all of those areas and start identifying opportunities for expansion. We have a great community college system here in Maricopa County and beyond, in outlying counties as well. And so finding ways to partner with them to bring educational opportunities inside the walls. I will tell you that, so our plan is underway. We've already expanded educational achievements by about 25% in the last year, whether it's high school equivalency or college education or career technical education opportunities. But our plan really is to use technology better to deliver more educational experiences, right? And that, again, requires partnership. And we're also partnering on the career and technical education side of things to capitalize on investments that have been made in the state of Arizona for the workforce in the state of Arizona outside of corrections. We're working closely with all of those state agencies and partners to bring workforce development opportunities and those educational opportunities inside our prisons to help train individuals so that they can go out and fill some of those jobs and contribute that way. So I think you'll see much more on the horizon. What's interesting around education, and this, we experienced this together in Maine, is corrections has an aversion to technology and really internet-based technology. There's immediate safety and security barriers that come up. And so a lot of our time is spent really challenging those struggles, those frustrations. Sometimes it's your IT team that has the biggest concerns. I'll have wardens and deputy wardens and staff who want educational programs to come in, and you have to work through some of those. People see some of these monsters behind trees that really aren't there, and you really have to break that down. And so we've been doing that. We partnered with MIT recently at one of our prison complexes, and we enrolled 5 people with laptops and internet technology into a coding class that was web-based. And it's gone very well, but boy, did we have some people that were scared to do that. But it's been a big win. Staff have seen that, and so it's about breaking through some of those barriers and demonstrating that you can do this safely. And because, to your point, we have to do that because of the impact, the positive impact it has, not only on the population but their family and the environment, the prison environment.
Interesting when you mentioned the access to the internet. I was watching the reactions from some of your wardens, and I know how that goes, right? We traveled that journey in Maine, and it's gone very well. And I think we have less incidents that you'd see than what you'd see in high school. So it's gone well, and wardens, I promise you'll be okay. Ryan, what have you done for collaboration with advocates and community stakeholders to enhance the programming and enhance the transition back into the community?
Yeah, a lot. You know, I spent very many nights, evenings, nights, weekends early on, you know, in my first 6 months here, meeting with community partners, stakeholders, advocacy groups, really just going out and in a similar way that I was doing with staff and the team here, of just sharing who I am, how I view corrections, and listening to their concerns. And so it built a lot of good partnerships and relationships. So what we're seeing now is some of the fruits of those partnerships, where we have, whether it's advocacy groups or just community stakeholders and partners that come to us wanting to help, right? Bringing good, sound program ideas, partnership ideas, opportunities for staff and the population to try something different, and wanting to come inside to deliver those things. And so we've got a whole host of those partners now. Really, some of what we're experiencing now is how do you almost slow that down to make it methodical, to make sure that you don't bring in too much too quickly, so that the population can really take full advantage of what you're providing to them, and that staff can experience the benefit of that, rather than go kind of on overload. You know, and so we're seeing that. I mentioned some workforce development things that we're doing. That's probably the topic area where we're having the greatest partnership conversation right now, as a state. But then we have a lot of local regional partnerships. We have a lot of population specific partnerships, whether it's the women's population or men's population, and then a lot of community reentry partnerships. We don't often talk about community corrections as much, you know, because a lot of the focus becomes on what's happening in our prisons, but our community reentry team has built out significant partnerships related to work, housing, treatment services, that continuity of care process. But again, it comes back to those partnerships are only able to be there when you have a level of trust established, right, with the public, with the partners. They have to see and know that you're doing what you say you're going to be doing, right? And so it's taken time to demonstrate that. It's taken time to put information you know, out to the public. It's taken time for our staff to become engaged with them along the way. And so now we're starting to really see the fruits of that labor.
Fantastic. Dr. Clements, I think our time is evaporating. Do you have a question?
I have one last question. I have so many questions, but given our time, one. Since you two know each other well, Commissioner Liberty, I'm wondering if you could identify the character quality that Dr. Thornell brings to Arizona that is most likely to ensure his success. So I think about, just as he mentioned about all the leadership books you read, take your time, go fast, go slow. You know, there's executive decision-making and strategic planning and all that. But at the end of the day, leaders, it's about character.
It certainly is. And with Dr. Thornell, I had the opportunity to work with him for, I think, maybe 7.5 years in capacities below him and in capacities working with him here in central office. And integrity, I think, is the most important. You know, his mantra of perfect effort. And so, you know, continually trying to improve the operation, both for the residents and the staff. He had a lot of compassion for the people that do the work every day, and had a great understanding of the difficulties, as he was an officer at one point in his career. And so he understood that fully. I think it's integrity. I think it's compassion. I think it's perfect effort. I think he does his homework, which is important. You know, when he arrives at a meeting, he knows what he's talking about, and he's done his homework. and he puts his hours in. I think, we were starting to get emails from him, I don't know, 4:15, 4:30, we start getting emails from him, and balancing work life, right? Trying to, raise a young family and do all that heavy lift. And here in Maine, he was transformational for us. And so I greatly appreciate the work here, and I'm glad that we could share him with Arizona.
Thank you.
Great.
Ryan, I guess I have one last question. What does every new commissioner need to know as they come into their position? What would you give them for advice?
I think the first thing I would, some of it depends on if they're, somebody that's been in that state for a long time, or they're coming in outside the state like I did. I think, but a staple piece of advice would be, every state system is different. And you have to recognize that, especially if you're coming in as an outsider. You really have to come in understanding that. And in doing that, you also have to remain very grounded and humble to the work that you're doing, right? You cannot come into a role as a director, as a commissioner at the top of an agency and make it about you or make it about where you've come from, right? You really have to stay focused on the work to be done. That requires you to roll up your sleeves and dive deep into the day-to-day work, right? I think the only way that you can be truly successful in making a change in a role like director, commissioner is to put the work in, right? And really understand that. And then the last piece of advice I would give them, that I could share here is that you have to maintain balance. You have to maintain balance at work, balancing staff, population, stakeholders, and the work you do, but you have to maintain balance in life, right? Because the burden is real. It is significant 24/7. And so you have to find a way to keep yourself balanced in order to be able to sustain and make the transformation that you want to make.
Dr. Thornell, it's been fantastic spending time with you as always. I'll turn now over to Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. It's great to listen and learn from you all and to be here with everyone who joined too, and so many great questions in the chat. This webinar series, I forgot to mention in the beginning, is a partnership between the Clements Initiative, the Center for Justice and Human Dignity, and the Correctional Leaders Association. So we're incredibly grateful for everyone who helps in planning these, especially Rachel Clements, who's been volunteering to put these together, the graphics, the invitations, everything. Rachel is volunteering her time to do that. CJHD currently has a very tiny staff, hoping that changes in the coming months. And just wanted to thank you, particularly Rachel, and thank you, Director Thornell, Dr. Lisa Clements, and Commissioner Liberty. Our next scheduled webinar will be on October 28th, and it's going to feature Director Rob Jeffries, who's the CLA president, and he's the current director in Nebraska. So hopefully folks can join that. We will get a YouTube recording out of this video to everyone who registered in the next couple weeks, as well as a link to sign up for the next webinar in the series. Two things, if people have suggestions for potential guests over probably looking at 2025 at this point for additional guests, but please feel free to email me. I'll put my email in the chat. Also, if there are correctional leaders who are in attendance today who want to learn more about these different approaches or consider working with us to implement changes in your individual facilities or across your state or other jurisdiction, please reach out to. I'll put my email in the chat. Thank you, everyone. Dr. Clements, do you have any closing words?
Thank you so much to Dr. Thornell and to Commissioner Liberty as well. Just such a pleasure to join you in this conversation. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.